Some of the greatest athletes in history were born with an advantage that millions of people spend their entire lives trying to overcome. The strange part? Almost nobody realizes it's hidden in something as ordinary as their height. Not because height automatically makes someone stronger or faster or more talented, but because it quietly changes the laws of physics your body has to play by. If I asked you which body is best for sport, most people would probably give the same answer: taller, longer, bigger. At first glance, it makes perfect sense. Longer legs should run faster. Longer arms should generate more force. A larger frame should dominate almost every physical challenge. The problem is, physics doesn't agree. Evolution never tried to build the perfect athletic body. Instead, it solved different physical problems by building different kinds of bodies. Some were optimized for rotation, others for force, others for speed, endurance, or reach. None of them are objectively better. They're simply playing by different laws of physics. That's why gymnasts don't look like powerlifters, swimmers aren't built like wrestlers, and basketball players share almost nothing in common with marathon runners. They're not solving the same physical problem. They're solving completely different ones. And once you understand those laws, something surprising happens. You stop asking whether your height is an advantage and start asking a much more interesting question. What was my body actually designed to do? The first answer begins with one of the oldest laws in physics: rotation. Imagine two gymnasts performing exactly the same skill. They've trained for years, they're equally strong, and they leave the floor with almost identical power. Yet one completes the rotation effortlessly, while the other simply runs out of time. At first, it looks like superior technique. It isn't. The difference was decided long before either athlete ever entered a gym. You've watched the same principle every Winter Olympics without even realizing it. A figure skater begins spinning with their arms stretched wide, then suddenly pulls everything closer to the body. Instantly, they rotate faster. They didn't become stronger in the middle of the spin. They became more compact. Physicists call this angular velocity. The closer mass moves toward the center of rotation, the faster the entire body can spin. The human body obeys exactly the same rule. A shorter athlete naturally carries more of their mass closer to the body's rotational center. That allows tighter rotation, faster spins, and greater control in the air than a much taller athlete can physically reproduce. Trying to out-rotate a 4'8" gymnast when you're 6 feet tall isn't really a question of training anymore. It's like trying to spin a broomstick as fast as a pencil. Both obey exactly the same laws of physics. One simply has geometry on its side. No athlete demonstrates this better than Simone Biles. People often describe her as fearless, explosive, or unbelievably hard-working. All of that is true. But biomechanics reveals another layer of the story. Her compact frame allows rotational speeds that become increasingly difficult as body length increases. Some of the skills that made her famous don't just require extraordinary courage. They require a body capable of completing the rotation before gravity ends the movement. That's the hidden advantage. Not stronger muscles, not superior determination, a body solving the problem of rotation more efficiently than almost anyone else on Earth. And here's what makes evolution so fascinating. Every physical advantage comes with a trade-off, because the moment your feet touch the ground, rotation stops deciding the winner. Force does. The moment an athlete's feet touch the ground, the rules quietly change. Rotation no longer decides the outcome. Now it's all about how efficiently your body can move force. At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Longer limbs should create more power. Longer legs should move heavier weight. A larger frame should dominate strength. Once again, physics disagrees. Imagine trying to loosen a rusted bolt with two different wrenches. One is short. The other is much longer. The longer wrench gives you greater reach, but every movement also has to travel farther before the force finally reaches the bolt. Your skeleton works in a surprisingly similar way. Every extra centimeter of bone increases the distance that muscles and joints must control under load. A shorter frame reduces that distance, allowing force to travel through the body more efficiently. In biomechanics, this rotational force around a joint is called torque. And under many lifting conditions, shorter levers quietly become a mechanical advantage. This is one of those rare moments where elite athletes stop looking extraordinary and start looking inevitable. Lamar Gant may be the most astonishing example ever recorded. Standing just 5 feet 2, he deadlifted more than 5 times his own body weight, a ratio that still ranks among the greatest feats in strength sport. People often credit incredible determination, and they should. But determination alone doesn't rewrite the laws of mechanics. His compact frame shortened the distance between the load and the joints producing the force, allowing his body to transfer power with remarkable efficiency. The very feature many people see as a limitation became one of his greatest competitive advantages. The same principle appears in combat sports, although it's much harder to notice because it happens in fractions of a second. Olympic wrestling champion and UFC double champion Henry Cejudo spent most of his career facing opponents who looked physically overwhelming, taller, longer, heavier. Yet before they could overpower him, they first had to overcome something much more stubborn than muscle: his center of gravity. A naturally lower center of mass makes the body remarkably stable. Before an opponent can throw you, they first have to move your entire base of support. That tiny mechanical advantage is often enough to change the outcome of a contest before raw strength even enters the equation. Suddenly, being the smaller athlete no longer looks like a disadvantage. It looks like a body solving an entirely different engineering problem. And by now, another pattern should be becoming clear. Evolution never gave every athlete the same advantage. It simply kept changing the laws of physics. First, it rewarded rotation. Then, it rewarded force. Watch almost any highlight reel of Lionel Messi, and you'll notice something that seems almost impossible. The defenders chasing him aren't slow. Many of them are just as fast over long distances, stronger in physical duels, and significantly taller. Yet somehow they always seem to arrive a fraction of a second too late, reaching for space where Messi was only moments before. For years, people called it talent. Others called it balance. Some simply called it genius. Physics gives it a different name: inertia. Every object resists changing its state of motion. The greater its mass, the more force it takes to stop, accelerate, and change direction again. It's one of the oldest laws in physics, and every human body obeys it. This is where medium-sized athletes often gain an advantage that is almost impossible to see with the naked eye. They carry enough muscle to accelerate explosively, but not so much mass that changing direction becomes mechanically expensive. Every cut, every pivot, and every sudden change of movement costs them just a little less than it costs a much larger body. The difference is almost invisible until competition begins. Messi's lower center of gravity and relatively compact frame allow him to redirect his body with extraordinary efficiency. While the defender is still slowing down from one movement, Messi has already accelerated into the next. It almost looks as though he's predicting the future. He isn't. He's simply paying a much smaller physics bill every time he changes direction. Exactly the same principle appears in boxing. Floyd Mayweather built one of the greatest defensive careers in history, not because he punched harder than everyone else, but because he could constantly reposition himself before his opponents had finished reacting. Time after time, elite fighters threw punches at empty space, convinced they had anticipated his next move. They hadn't lost to magic, they had lost to mechanics. And suddenly, another pattern begins to emerge. Rotation rewarded compact bodies. Torque rewarded efficient levers. Now, inertia rewards the body that can change direction before everyone else has finished changing theirs. But something even more interesting is beginning to happen. Every body we've explored so far has been brilliantly designed to solve one specific problem: rotation, force, agility. So, the obvious question becomes, what happens when evolution stops building specialists and starts building a body that can do almost everything well? By now, a pattern has probably started to emerge. Every body we've explored has revealed a hidden advantage. One rotates more efficiently. Another transfers force with remarkable precision. Another changes direction so effortlessly that it almost seems to ignore the laws of motion, which naturally leads to the next question. So, which height is actually the best? Surprisingly, biology refuses to answer, because evolution was never trying to build the perfect specialist. It was trying to build the body that could solve the greatest number of different problems. In nature, extreme specialization is incredibly powerful, but it almost always comes at a cost. The fastest animals rarely have the greatest endurance. The strongest rarely move with the greatest efficiency. Every extraordinary advantage usually asks for a sacrifice somewhere else. Evolution understands that trade-off better than anyone. That's why, around the average adult height, roughly 5'10" to 6'1" for men, the human body begins doing something completely different. Instead of maximizing one physical ability, it starts balancing many of them at the same time. The legs are long enough to generate powerful, efficient strides without becoming mechanically cumbersome. Reach improves without dramatically increasing inertia. Strength, endurance, coordination, and precision stop competing with one another and begin working together. For the first time, the body behaves less like a specialist and more like a remarkably versatile machine. That is why so many sports demanding multiple physical qualities at once, tennis, mixed martial arts, decathlon, and even modern CrossFit, are consistently filled with athletes in this range. Not because they possess one overwhelming advantage, but because almost nothing works against them. Roger Federer may be the clearest illustration of this principle. For more than 20 years, he rarely looked like the strongest player on the court. He wasn't the fastest, he didn't hit the hardest. Yet somehow, he seemed capable of doing everything exceptionally well. Power, precision, endurance, efficiency. His body wasn't dominating because one physical trait overwhelmed everyone else. It dominated because almost none of its traits became a limitation. And perhaps that's the most underrated athletic advantage of all. Maybe that's why so many people spend their lives wishing for a different body without realizing evolution was solving a completely different problem with the one they already have. But here's where the story takes one final turn. Everything we've explored so far has been about balance. Balance between speed and strength, between power and endurance, between rotation and stability. The next bodies stop chasing balance altogether. Instead, they begin exploiting something much more intimidating: distance. Because once reach becomes the dominant advantage, your body no longer changes the way you move. It starts changing the way everyone else has to move around you.